10 years ago, I saved a drowning boy. I conducted a rapid rescue on him. After waking up, he told me, "I have decided to marry you when I grow up." Thinking that he was joking, I didn't take his words seriously. 10 years later, the boy grew up, becoming a crazy and domineering CEO, whose name was Brian Hawk. At my wedding with my fiancé, he led a group of people and beat up my fiancé, forcibly taking me away. I told you I would marry you. Your husband can only be me. Chapter 1. 10 years ago, I saved a drowning boy. I conducted a rapid rescue on him. After waking up, he told me, "I have decided to marry you when I grow up." Thinking that he was joking, I didn't take his words seriously. 10 years later, the boy grew up, becoming a crazy and domineering CEO, whose name was Brian Hawk. At my wedding with my fiancé, he led a group of people and beat up my fiancé, forcibly taking me away. I told you I would marry you. Your husband can only be me. He threatened me with my whole family's lives and forced me to marry him. He imprisoned me in a private villa, allowing no man to be in touch with me. To win me over, he tried every means, but I remained unmoved. He became furious and found someone who was 90% like me to replace me. Relying on his affection and favoritism, the substitute, Ariel Berg, did whatever she wanted and broke into the villa where I lived. Where did this cheap woman come from? How dare she pretend to be me and seduce my man? I will tear you apart today. She stripped me naked, cut off my tongue, and ordered the bodyguards to ravage and humiliate me. Only after I was tortured to death did Brian arrive late. Ariel dragged my body to the front of Brian, who was overbearing. She proudly said, "Darling, this woman, who had done plastic surgery, wanted to hide here and seduce you. I killed her for you." Brian Hawk was infatuated and crazy. According to him, right from the moment I saved him, he decided to marry no one else but me. To win me over, he imprisoned me for 3 years and tried every means to please me every day. But I, who didn't love him at all, couldn't accept him. Recently, he got a substitute who looked like me. The two of them had been getting along affectionately for several months. To provoke me, Brian often forwarded me videos showing how ambiguous they were on WhatsApp. As I was sitting in the courtyard and enjoying their videos, there was a sudden burst of noise outside. Brian comes here every few days. Today, I want to see what kind of treasures are hidden in this villa. But didn't Mr. Hawk say that this villa was his private restricted area and no one was allowed to come here? Yes, Ariel. I heard that someone took a glance inside the villa before. Mr. Hawk broke his hands and dug out his eyes. Isn't it inappropriate for us to sneak in without his permission? What are you afraid of? Brian dotes on me to the bone. He won't blame me. Listening to the noisy sound outside the courtyard, I frowned slightly and felt uneasy. I knew better than anyone about how crazy Brian was. He had strong possessiveness, treating me as his private possession and imprisoning me in this villa. Someone once had sneaked into my villa out of curiosity and taken a glance at me. Brian disabled his hands and feet, digging out his eyes. The next day, the man vanished into the void. At first, he was only jealous of other men. Later, he realized that I, who had never been gentle to him, treated the housemaid gently. He dismissed all the housemaids in a fit of anger. He would rather personally deliver daily meals to me than let anyone else do it. Except him, no one else could look at me in my eyes for a moment. If those people outside the courtyard come in, they may be in big trouble. I quickly got up and intended to remind them to leave here as soon as possible. As soon as the door opened, someone who looked almost the same as me came into my view. Before I could say something, she slapped me hard across my face. Where did this cheap woman come from? How dare she disguise herself as me and hide in Brian's villa? Do you want to compete with me for a man? She hit me with a sudden slap, making my face burn with pain. You cheap woman who did plastic surgery. Do you know where you are? How dare you barge in here without the owner's permission? You deliberately made yourself look like Ariel to seduce Mr. Hawk. You let go of your dignity to climb up the ladder, right? At this moment, I finally realized that the person who had suddenly come in and attacked me was Ariel Berg, the substitute who Brian had found. Because of Brian's pathological desire for control, I had always been indifferent towards him. Even though I was forced to marry him, I treated him indifferently. I never let him touch me. Perhaps out of resentment, or to make up for his regrets, he searched everywhere for someone who resembled me. Ariel Berg was the substitute he had found, who resembled me the most. At this moment, Ariel, looking furious, looked at me with overwhelming resentment. You slut. You know that Brian is hopelessly in love with me, so you try every means to make yourself look like me. You want to replace me as my double, don't you? Ariel was arrogant and flamboyant. Since she doesn't know the truth, I don't intend to argue with her about why she slapped me. Instead, I kindly advised her, you shouldn't be here. Before Brian arrives, leave here quickly. Otherwise, no one can help you. However, Ariel didn't appreciate my kindness at all. Instead, she grabbed my hair angrily and said, Brian is my man. I can wander around everywhere in his territory. You're planning to drive me away. After all, you're afraid that I, the rightful owner, will ruin your scheme and leave you with no chance to be a mistress, right? Today, I will make you know the consequences of stealing my man. After saying that, Ariel kicked me to the ground. I stumbled onto the rocks. My forehead instantly cracked open. I touched the blood on my forehead and looked at the imposing Ariel. I said indifferently, Aren't you afraid that Brian will find out about your reckless behavior? Ariel sneered disdainfully. I am the destined love that Brian has been searching for a long time. Even if I have a little scratch on my face, he will be so worried about me and make himself restless for a few days. Even if he knows about what I did, so what? Will he blame me because of you, an insignificant person? Several of Ariel's friends sneered and echoed.
Exactly.
Everyone knows that Mr. Hawk fell in love with Ariel at first sight. How can you, her imitator, who did plastic surgery, compare to her? Ariel, with Mr. Hawk's distinguished identity, there must be many seductive women like this bitch trying to seduce him. Today, we happen to make her an example and scare them off. Then we can cut off the crooked thoughts of those seductive bitches. Yes, we will let those despicable women who want to climb the social ladder know who the real Mrs. Hawk is. All of them each spoke sharp words and looked fierce. They were eager to tear me apart. I looked serious and indifferently said, You'd better ask Brian to find out who I am. Ariel raised her chin and looked disdainful. Do you, a plastic surgery woman who sneaked into the villa, deserve me to inquire about your identity? I am Brian's favorite. The Berg family is the biggest partner of the Hawk family. Who the hell are you? Are you qualified to show off your status against mine? As she said, she looked fierce and ordered several of her best friends behind her. Strip this bitch naked. I want to see if she can make her body look exactly like mine. Hearing this, her best friends immediately rushed over and violently tore off my clothes. While I was desperately preventing them from stripping my clothes, I shouted, Stop it. I am Brian's wife. Hearing what I said, they immediately stopped what they were doing. Ariel stood aside, squinting at me. You said you were Brian's wife. I said seriously, Yes, you are a substitute he found. If he knows that you hurt me like this, he will not let you go. I thought that Ariel would thus retreat after I revealed the truth. Unexpectedly, they burst into laughter almost at the same time. This bitch. Is she that eager to take my place? Relying on the fact that she looks somewhat similar to Ariel, she dares to say that Ariel is her substitute. Everyone knows that Mr. Hawk always takes Ariel with him wherever he goes. You, a sneaky plastic surgery woman, dare to call yourself Mr. Hawk's wife. On the other hand, Ariel smiled viciously. I thought you would be something. After all, you disguise yourself as me to seduce Brian. I didn't expect you to be a brainless idiot. I've been with Brian for so long. I didn't even know he had a wife. Are you that bold? How dare you tell such an outrageous lie? If you were the real Mrs. Hawk, how could you live alone in this desolate villa without anyone knowing it? After saying that, Ariel snorted and ordered her several girlfriends. Continue to strip her clothes. Leave nothing behind. Upon hearing this, her best friends did not hesitate as they violently tore off my clothes. None of them knew the reason why no one was around this villa. Brian bought all this large piece of land. No one can come here without his permission. Originally, bodyguards and maids were living here. Because of Brian's jealousy, he dismissed everyone. He doesn't announce my identity to the public so that others won't take an extra glance at me. Even if they're discussing things related to me, he will feel it's blasphemy against me. I never expected that all Brian had done to me would become the reason why they had doubts about my identity. Seeing my clothes being torn to pieces, I panicked and shouted, "I am Brian's wife. If you don't believe me, call him." After hearing what I said, they became even more fierce. They didn't stop what they were doing. While tearing off my clothes frantically, they slapped me in the face. "You damn bitch. Do you dare to lie? Let's see how we will wake you up today." Soon, my face turned red and swollen. I was disheveled. With my clothes barely covering me, a lot of skin on my body was exposed. Seeing this, Ariel narrowed her eyes and said gently, "This bitch's hair is too annoying. It's hindering her from showing off her body." As she said that, she revealed an evil smile and took out a lighter. She set my hair on fire. The fire quickly spread on my head. An intense burning sensation engulfed me. For a moment, my cheeks, ears, and entire scalp felt a burst of strong burning pain. The pain was unbearable. I instinctively tried to pat out the fire with my hands, but they firmly held me down. In the blink of an eye, my hair was all burned. My scalp was covered in burn marks. At my look, Ariel laughed with satisfaction. "It's funny. With your bald and ugly face, how are you going to seduce men in the future?" Her several close friends laughed and applauded. I stared at them, trembling all over. Then I shouted, "You will regret this." Brian threatened me with the lives of my entire family. I had been imprisoned for many years. I stayed at the empty villa in a daze day after day. It made me even more frustrated. Now, I had to endure Ariel's torment. The anger in my heart instantly turned into intense hatred. Ariel walked up to me and stepped heavily on my face with her foot. "How dare you challenge me? Since what you say will always displease me, you shouldn't speak anymore. Cut off this bitch's tongue." With her command, one of Ariel's bodyguards behind her walked towards me with a dagger in his hands. Seeing this, one of Ariel's best friends, who was timid, said fumblingly, "Ariel, this is Mr. Hawk's territory after all. Is it appropriate for us to make such a big scene?" Ariel said without hesitation, "What's wrong? Brian is my man. His house is my house. I'm just educating a shameless bitch in my home. Who dares to say anything to me? Besides, Brian loves me so much. Even if I kill this bitch, he won't frown at me." Her other girlfriends echoed, "That's right. Ariel is Mr. Hawk's most beloved woman. There's nothing she can't do. When the time comes, Mr. Hawk will only feel sorry for Ariel for exhausting herself from dealing with the bitch." Hearing their words, the timid girl no longer had any concerns. She watched the show with peace of mind. I lay on the ground, watching the dagger in the bodyguard's hands. He was getting closer and closer to me. I was extremely frightened, shouting in panic, "I am indeed Brian's wife. If you do this, Brian will never let you go." However, my threats had no effect. The bodyguard came to me and extended a dagger towards me. I wanted to escape, but several of Ariel's best friends firmly held me down. I wanted to hide, but the dagger, shining with cold light, had deeply cut into my mouth. The bodyguard lifted his hand and stabbed at me with the dagger. In a daze, I saw a large amount of blood and my severed tongue falling from my mouth. The pain was extreme. I felt like all the nerves in my body were severed. I was about to faint. I was like a pile of mud, lying in a pool of blood. I couldn't move, and my breath was weak. Ariel stood with her arms crossed, looking down at me. She said, "Even though you had plastic surgery to make yourself look like me, with your appearance, Brian would never take you seriously. He loves me as a person." Got it. Not everyone can live such a good life as me. Brian won't fall in love with any woman. Since you, a bitch, are so desperate for a man, I'll reward you with a few men. After saying that, she looked at the several bodyguards behind her. She said indifferently, "I'll give this bitch to you to play with. Whoever works the hardest on her, I'll reward them with $2 million." At Ariel's words, the bodyguards' eyes instantly lit up. They rubbed their hands eagerly and fiercely, planning to pounce on me. I collapsed on the ground without any strength to resist. I wanted to shout, but I had no tongue. My mouth was full of blood. I couldn't make a sound. I could only let them ravage me. Brian imprisoned me here obsessively, but he had never hurt me or touched me. Even if I didn't want to get close to him, he never forced himself on me. He said he would wait for the day when I was willing to give myself to him. He said I was destined to be his in this lifetime. But now I was overwhelmed by a group of bodyguards. I was helpless. Helplessness and despair engulfed me. I couldn't speak, crying uncontrollably. "Brian, is this the result you want?" A few of Ariel's best friends watched the show and praised Ariel. They said, "Ariel is destined to be Mrs. Hawk. She is good at teaching others a lesson."
Yes. See?
This despicable woman was stubborn at first, but now she is made to cry. It's funny. She probably won't dare to seduce men anymore in the future. Congratulations to Ariel for successfully getting rid of a despicable bitch. Let's see who dares to compete with you for the position of Mrs. Hawk in the future. Ariel smiled victoriously and proudly as they praised her. The excited bodyguards suddenly looked strange. The next moment, a bodyguard stood up and pointed at me. He reported, saying, "Miss Berg, this woman is dead." Hearing this, Ariel frowned and looked disgusted. How unlucky. Bury her somewhere quickly in case she will stink Brian's eyes. As soon as she finished speaking, Brian walked into the courtyard. "What are you doing?" Chapter 2 the following week was a blur of appointments and procedures for Lily. Each day was a repetition of the last, a cycle of faces and memories that blended together in a kaleidoscope of pain and longing. But beneath the surface, a question festered, a seed of doubt that had taken root in the soil of her conscience. She sat in her office, the door closed against the world. The room was a sanctuary, a place where she could escape the prying eyes and the whispered judgments of her colleagues. The walls were adorned with certificates and degrees, a testament to her intellect and her dedication to her field. But today, they felt like a mockery, a hollow reminder of the path she had chosen. Lily opened the file on her desk, the pages filled with notes and observations from her sessions with Mr. Smith. She had reviewed the data, had analyzed the results of the memory manipulation. On paper, the procedure had been a success. Mr. Smith's trauma was gone, his pain a thing of the past. But as she read through the case notes, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Mr. Smith's effect had changed, his demeanor shifting in subtle ways that the data couldn't quite capture. He was less hesitant, more assertive, but there was a hardness to him now, a coldness that hadn't been there before. She flipped through the pages, her eyes drawn to a series of before and after personality assessments. The results were stark, a clear indication that something fundamental had changed within Mr. Smith. His empathy scores had dropped, his emotional responsiveness dulled. It was as if a part of his soul had been extinguished, snuffed out like a candle in the wind. Lily leaned back in her chair, her eyes tracing the ceiling tiles as she pondered the implications. Memory manipulation was a delicate art, a dance with the very essence of a person's identity. She had always believed in the power of her work to heal, to give people a second chance at happiness. But what if she was wrong? What if the cost of that happiness was too high? The door to her office was knocking, pulling Lily from her thoughts. She looked up to see Dr. Anderson standing in the doorway, his face a mask of concern. "Lily, are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with a professionalism that barely concealed his curiosity. She nodded, closing the file on her desk. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile that felt brittle and false. Dr. Anderson's eyes flicked to the file, his brow furrowing slightly. "I heard about Mr. Smith's case. The results were unexpected." Lily's heart skipped a beat, a cold dread settling in the pit of her stomach. "Unexpected how?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Anderson sighed, stepping into the office and closing the door behind him. His behavior has been off. He's been making some questionable decisions, both personally and professionally. There's concern that the memory manipulation may have had unforeseen side effects. Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another like leaves in a storm. She had been right. There was something wrong, something she had missed. She had played God, had tampered with the very fabric of Mr. Smith's being, and now he was paying the price. "I need to see him," she said, her voice firm with resolve. "I need to assess him personally, to understand what's happening." Dr. Anderson nodded, his expression grim. "I'll arrange it. But be careful, Lily. We're treading on dangerous ground here. If word gets out about this." He trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air between them. If the public learned about the potential dangers of memory manipulation, it could destroy everything they had built, could tear down the walls of neurotech and leave them exposed and vulnerable. Lily nodded, her determination hardening within her. "I understand the stakes, but I can't just sit back and do nothing. Not when I might be able to help." Dr. Anderson's eyes softened, a grudging respect flickering in their depths. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why you're the best at what you do. But be careful, Lily. The world isn't always ready for the truth." He left her then, the door clicking shut behind him. Lily sat alone in her office, the silence a heavy weight pressing down on her. She had always believed in the power of her work, had seen the potential for good in every memory she had altered. But now, she was forced to confront the possibility that her work could cause harm, that her best intentions could have dire consequences. She opened the file again, her eyes scanning the pages with a new perspective. She would find the answers, would uncover the truth about what had happened to Mr. Smith. And she would do whatever it took to set things right, even if it meant risking everything she had worked for. Chapter 3. Lily stood in the shadow of Neurotech's main building, her gaze fixed on the towering structure that loomed before her. The sun cast long, skeletal fingers of light across the glass and steel facade, giving the impression of a monster reaching out to claim its prey. She took a deep breath, the cool morning air sharp in her lungs, and stepped forward, her resolve firm. She had spent the night poring over files, her eyes straining to make sense of the data that seemed to dance just beyond her grasp. The conspiracy within Neurotech was deeper than she had imagined, its tentacles reaching into the highest levels of the company. She had seen the memos, the coded messages, the names of those involved. And now, she was about to confront one of the key players in this web of deceit. Dr. Anderson was already in his office when Lily arrived, his silhouette framed in the soft glow of the desk lamp. He looked up as she entered, his eyes narrowing slightly at the sight of her. "Lily," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is an unexpected visit. What brings you here so early?" Lily closed the door behind her, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady. "About the memory manipulation program." Dr. Anderson's expression didn't change, but she could see the wariness in his eyes. "What about it?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. "I've seen the memos," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know what's really going on here." For a moment, Dr. Anderson said nothing. He simply stared at her, his eyes searching her face as if trying to gauge the depth of her knowledge. Finally, he sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "What do you want to know?" Lily's mind raced, 100 questions vying for attention. But one stood out above the rest. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Dr. Anderson looked away, his gaze fixed on the window and the city beyond. "It's complicated," he said, his voice distant. "There are forces at play here that you can't possibly understand." Lily's anger flared, a hot spark in the cold pit of her stomach. "Try me," she said, her voice sharp. Dr. Anderson turned back to her, his eyes hard. "This isn't about right or wrong, Lily. It's about progress. About pushing the boundaries of what's possible." "At what cost?" Lily demanded, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "You're playing with people's lives, with their minds. That's not progress. It's exploitation. Dr. Anderson's expression softened, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I never wanted it to be like this, he said, his voice low. But we're so close, Lily. So close to something that could change the world. Lily shook her head, her heart aching with disappointment and betrayal. You're wrong, she said, her voice firm. This isn't the way. We can't sacrifice our humanity for the sake of progress. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the silence between them thick with unspoken words and shattered dreams. Finally, Dr. Anderson sighed, the sound heavy with defeat. What are you going to do? Lily's resolve hardened within her. I'm going to stop you, she said, her voice steady. I'm going to expose the truth and put an end to this once and for all. Dr. Anderson nodded, his expression resigned. I can't say I didn't see this coming. But be careful, Lily. There are powerful people involved, people who won't hesitate to protect their interests. Lily nodded, her heart pounding with determination. I know, she said, but I can't stand by and do nothing. Not when so much is at stake. She turned then, leaving Dr. Anderson's office and stepping out into the bright morning light. The world seemed different somehow, brighter and darker all at once. She had always believed in the power of science, in the potential for good that lay within their work. But now, she was forced to confront the reality of what they had become, the monster that neurotech had turned into. As she walked, her mind raced with plans and strategies, each step bringing her closer to the fight ahead. She would need evidence, proof of the conspiracy that she could take to the authorities. She would need allies, people she could trust to help her navigate the treacherous waters that lay ahead. Her thoughts turned to her colleagues, to the friends she had made within the company. Who could she trust? Who was involved in the conspiracy? The questions swirled in her mind, a whirlwind of doubt and fear. She thought of Sarah, her closest friend at Neurotech. They had started together, had climbed the ranks side by side. But could she trust her? Could she risk sharing her suspicions, her plans? The answer came to her as she reached her own office, the door closing behind her with a soft click. She would have to tread carefully, would need to watch her back and guard her words. But she would not give up, would not let the darkness that had taken root within Neurotech go unchallenged. She sat down at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The files were there, the evidence she needed to bring down the conspiracy. But she would need to be smart, would need to move carefully and quietly to avoid raising suspicion. As she began to type, a sense of calm settled over her, a quiet determination that burned like a flame in the darkness. She was alone in this fight, but she was not defenseless. She had her wits, her courage, and a burning desire to see justice done. And so, she began to plan, her fingers flying over the keys as she laid the groundwork for her rebellion. She would need to move quickly, would need to strike before they realized what she was doing. But she was ready, her resolve hardened like steel in the face of the challenge ahead. Chapter 4. The shadows of the setting sun stretched across the Neurotech parking lot as Lily made her way to Sarah's car. She had always admired the sleek, electric vehicle, a symbol of Sarah's commitment to the future. But today it was a lifeline, a means of escape from the prying eyes of the company. Lily slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her thighs. Sarah greeted her with a warm smile, but Lily could see the questions lurking in her eyes. You wanted to meet? Sarah asked, her fingers hovering over the start button. Lily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. I need your help, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I've discovered something terrible. Sarah's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. What is it? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily took a deep breath, the words catching in her throat. There's a conspiracy within Neurotech, she said, the words hanging heavy in the air between them. They're using memory manipulation for their own ends, manipulating people's lives for profit. Sarah's eyes widened, her fingers tightening on the steering wheel. That's insane, she said, her voice shaky. How do you know? Lily hesitated, her mind racing. How much could she trust Sarah? How much should she reveal? But she could see the sincerity in her friend's eyes, the concern that was genuine and deep. "I've seen the files," she said, her voice low. "I've talked to Dr. Anderson." Sarah's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. "Anderson? But he's one of the founders of neurotech. Why would he?" "I don't know," Lily admitted, her voice heavy with frustration. "But I intend to find out. And I need your help." Sarah was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Lily could see the wheels turning in her mind, the questions and doubts warring with her loyalty to neurotech. Finally, she nodded, her expression resolute. "What do you need me to do?" Lily's heart leaped at the words, a spark of hope igniting within her. "I need you to help me gather evidence," she said, her voice steady. "We need to expose the truth, to stop them before they can do any more harm." Sarah nodded, her jaw set in determination. "All right, let's do this." They spent the next several hours poring over files, their eyes straining in the dim light of Sarah's apartment. The evidence was there, hidden in plain sight, a trail of memos and emails that revealed the depths of the conspiracy. But as they dug deeper, Lily began to see a pattern, a series of events that seemed too coincidental to be chance. "Look at this," she said, her finger tracing a line of text on the screen. "These memory manipulations, they all seem to be tied to key players in the city's infrastructure. Politicians, business leaders, even law enforcement." Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned the documents. "You think they're controlling them?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily nodded, her heart pounding with the gravity of their discovery. "It's the only explanation that makes sense," she said, her voice grim. "They're using memory manipulation to control the city, to shape it to their own ends." The realization hung between them, a chilling revelation that shook them to their core. They were up against something far more powerful and insidious than they had imagined, a force that was entrenched in the very fabric of the city. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. "We can't let them get away with this," she said, her voice steady. "No matter what it takes, we have to stop them." Lily nodded, her resolve hardening within her. "We will," she said, her voice firm. "We'll expose the truth, and we'll bring them down." As the night wore on, they continued their work, their determination fueled by the knowledge of what was at stake. They were fighting for more than just their own lives now. They were fighting for the soul of the city, for the very essence of humanity. But as they worked, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were following their every move. She tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but the feeling persisted, a cold shadow that clung to her despite her best efforts. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, they sat back, their eyes red and their bodies weary. They had made progress, had gathered enough evidence to start putting the pieces together. But they both knew that the battle was far from won, that the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. Sarah looked at Lily, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "We should get some rest," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "We'll need our strength for what's to come." Lily nodded, her own body aching with fatigue. "You're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can't let our guard down. Not for a second." They settled in for a few hours of uneasy sleep, their dreams haunted by the shadows of the conspiracy that loomed over them. But as they slept, they were unaware of the figure that watched them from the darkness, a silent sentinel that held the key to their undoing. Sarah's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in this together, bound by a shared determination to see this through to the end. "All right," she said, her voice steady. "But we have to be careful. We don't know what they've done to him." They spent the next several hours tending to Dr. Anderson, their efforts a delicate balance of care and vigilance. They gave him water, tried to coax him into eating, but he remained largely unresponsive, his words few and far between. As the hours passed, Lily couldn't help but study him, her mind replaying their last conversation over and over again. There was something in his eyes, a desperation that spoke of a deeper truth, a secret that he was desperate for her to uncover. Sarah, sensing her thoughts, moved to sit beside her. What do you think he's hiding? She asked, her voice low. Lily sighed, her gaze never leaving Dr. Anderson. I don't know, but it's big, whatever it is. He risked everything to try to tell us. Sarah nodded, her expression solemn. We'll find out, she said, her voice filled with a determination that matched Lily's own. We'll get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Dr. Anderson's condition seemed to improve slightly. He stirred, his eyes opening to regard them with a clarity that had been missing before. Lily leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Dr. Anderson, we need to know what's going on. What were you trying to tell us? Dr. Anderson's gaze met hers, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. It's the project, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's not just about control. It's about creation. Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. Creation? What do you mean? Dr. Anderson's eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to Lily. They're creating something, he said, his voice urgent. Something that could change everything. Before he could elaborate, a loud crash echoed through the house, the sound of shattering glass followed by the distinct report of gunfire. Sarah and Lily exchanged a panicked look, their hearts pounding in their chests as they realized the truth. They had been found. Chapter 7. The world outside the safe house had erupted into chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, their mournful cries mingling with the sharp reports of gunfire. Lily and Sarah exchanged a glance, their eyes reflecting the same grim determination. Dr. Anderson's words echoed in their minds, a chilling reminder of the stakes. The lab, he had whispered, his voice a frayed thread of sound. It's in the old warehouse district. You'll find the truth there. Now, as they crept through the shadows, the weight of his words pressed down on them. The night was alive with danger, the city transformed into a battleground where the lines between friend and foe were blurred. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a staccato rhythm that matched the pace of her footsteps. She could feel the cool night air on her skin, the scent of smoke and cordite sharp in her nostrils. Her hands were steady as she clutched the weapon Sarah had given her, its weight a comforting presence in the face of the unknown. They moved in silence, their steps synchronized as they navigated the dark streets. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a maze of abandoned buildings and rusted machinery that seemed to swallow the light. The air here was heavy with the scent of decay, the ground littered with the debris of a past era. Sarah pointed to a dilapidated structure, its walls tagged with graffiti and its windows shattered. That's it, she whispered, her voice barely a breath of sound. The entrance is around back. Lily nodded, her gaze scanning the area for any sign of movement. Her senses were on high alert, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. She could feel it, the tension in the air, the sense of something lurking just beyond the edge of her vision. They approached the warehouse with caution, their footsteps soft on the cracked pavement. The back door was a rusted slab of metal, its surface pitted with age and neglect. Sarah reached for the handle, her fingers wrapping around the cold metal as she pushed it open. The interior of the warehouse was a cavernous space, the ceiling lost in shadows and the walls lined with rows of abandoned machinery. The air was thick with dust, the floor littered with the debris of a past era. In the center of the space, a single door stood out, its surface gleaming with a cold, metallic sheen. Lily's breath hitched as she approached the door. She could feel it, a sense of wrongness that clung to the air like a fog. This was more than just a room, more than just a lab. This was the heart of the conspiracy, the source of the darkness that had taken root within neurotech. Sarah moved to her side, her fingers hovering over the door's keypad. "We'll need a code," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to remember anything at all, that might help them. And then, like a flash of lightning in the darkness, it came to her. "Try his birthday," she said, her voice steady. Dr. Anderson mentioned it once. "It's 041388. Sarah's fingers flew over the keypad, the numbers glowing softly in the dim light. There was a soft click, And then the door swung open, revealing a staircase that led down into the depths of the building. They moved down the stairs, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around them as they descended. At the bottom of the stairs, another door stood waiting, this one unmarked and featureless. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she reached for the handle. She could feel it, the anticipation, the fear, the determination. This was it, the moment of truth, the revelation that could change everything. She pushed the door open, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. The room was a laboratory, its walls lined with screens and machines that hummed softly in the semi-darkness. In the center of the room, a single figure stood out, his back to them, his hands moving over a console with a practiced ease. Sarah's breath hissed out between her teeth, her grip tightening on her weapon. "Who is that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily's heart skipped a beat as the figure turned, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the screens. It was a man she recognized, a face from her past that she had never expected to see again. "Dr. Thompson," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of shock and realization. "You're behind this." The man's eyes met hers, his expression a mixture of resignation and defiance. "I had no choice," he said, his voice low. "The project, it's out of control." Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Dr. Thompson, her mentor, her friend, he was involved in the conspiracy, a part of the darkness that had taken root within neurotech. Sarah moved to her side, her gaze never leaving Dr. Thompson. "What is this project?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "What are you creating?" Dr. Thompson sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his secrets was too much to bear. "It started as a way to help people," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "To heal the damaged, to give them a second chance. But it went wrong." Lily's heart ached at the pain in his voice, the sorrow in his eyes. She had known Dr. Thompson for years, had respected him, admired him. But now, she was forced to confront the reality of his betrayal, the truth of his involvement in the conspiracy. "Show us," she said, her voice firm despite the turmoil within her. "Show us what you've done." Dr. Thompson nodded, his expression resigned. He led them through the lab, his steps slow and measured as if each step was an effort of monumental proportions. They passed rows of machines, their surfaces gleaming in the soft light, their functions hidden behind a veil of technology. Finally, they reached a large glass chamber, its interior filled with a soft, blue light. Inside, a figure lay suspended, their body connected to a complex web of tubes and wires that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Lily's breath hitched as she recognized the figure, her heart pounding in her chest as she took in the sight. It was a woman, her face serene and peaceful in repose. But it was the woman's eyes that held Lily's attention, their blue depths filled with a strange, otherworldly glow. "This is..." Sarah began, her voice trailing off as she stared at the woman in the chamber. Dr. Thompson nodded, his gaze fixed on the woman. "This is the project," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is what we've created." Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. The woman in the chamber, the strange glow in her eyes, it was like nothing she had ever seen before, a creation that defied explanation. "What is she?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Thompson sighed, his gaze never leaving the woman. "She's the future," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and regret. "She's the next step in human evolution." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to process the implications. The woman in the chamber, the project that had gone wrong, it was a creation that could change everything, a being that was unlike anything the world had ever seen. As they stood there, staring at the woman in the chamber, a sense of awe and dread settled over them. They had uncovered the truth, had discovered the secret at the heart of the conspiracy. But as they stood there, they couldn't help but wonder what would happen next, what the future held for them all. Chapter 8. The hum of the laboratory was a constant backdrop, a symphony of technology that spoke of human ingenuity and ambition. But for Lily and Sarah, it was a reminder of the ethical lines that had been crossed, a chilling testament to the lengths neurotech was willing to go. Dr. Thompson stood before them, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and regret. "We can fix this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with desperation. "We can reverse what's been done." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to process the implications of his words. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Thompson led them to a bank of computers, their screens filled with complex algorithms and data streams. The project was designed to enhance the human mind, to unlock latent potential, he explained, his fingers tracing the lines of code on the screen. But something went wrong. The enhancements, they became something else. Sarah leaned in, her eyes scanning the data. "What do you mean, something else?" she asked, her voice sharp. Dr. Thompson sighed, his shoulders slumping as if the weight of his secrets was too much to bear. "The enhancements, they've become a weapon," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "A way to control, to manipulate." Lily's heart ached at the pain in his voice, the sorrow in his eyes. She had known Dr. Thompson for years, had respected him, admired him. But now, she was forced to confront the reality of his betrayal, the truth of his involvement in the conspiracy. "But you can stop it," Sarah said, her voice firm. "You can reverse the process, right?" Dr. Thompson nodded, his gaze never leaving the screens. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it won't be easy. And there are risks." Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to make sense of what she was hearing. The project, the enhancements, the risks, it was a tangled web of science and ethics, a maze with no clear path. "But we have to try," she said, her voice firm despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. "We can't let this continue." Sarah nodded, her expression resolute. "All right. What's the plan?" Dr. Thompson turned to them, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "We'll need to access the main server," he said, pointing to a door at the far end of the lab. "From there, we can initiate the shutdown sequence, reverse the enhancements." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight of the door. It was a simple piece of technology, a barrier that stood between them and the truth. Sarah moved to the door, her fingers hovering over the keypad. "We'll need a code," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to remember anything at all, that might help them. And then, like a flash of lightning in the darkness, it came to her. "Try his birthday," she said, her voice steady. Dr. Anderson mentioned it once. "It's 041388. Sarah's fingers flew over the keypad, the numbers glowing softly in the dim light. There was a soft click, and then the door swung open, revealing a staircase that led down into the depths of the building. They moved down the stairs, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around them as they descended. At the bottom of the stairs, another door stood waiting, this one unmarked and featureless. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she reached for the handle. She could feel it, the anticipation, the fear, the determination. This was it, the moment of truth, the revelation that could change everything. She pushed the door open, her eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. The room was a server farm, its walls lined with rows of humming machines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. In the center of the room, a single console stood out, its surface gleaming in the soft light. Sarah moved to the console, her fingers moving over the keys with a practiced ease. "I'm in," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the screens. The data scrolled by, a river of information that seemed to blur together in a sea of numbers and letters. Dr. Thompson moved to Sarah's side, his gaze fixed on the screens. "Initiate the shutdown sequence," he said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of urgency. We need to move fast. Sarah's fingers flew over the keys, her eyes scanning the screens as she initiated the sequence. The machines around them hummed louder, their lights flickering as the sequence began to take effect. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the screens. The data scrolled by, the machines humming louder as the shutdown sequence initiated. And then, just as they were about to complete the sequence, the lights flickered, the machines around them emitting a high-pitched whine that sent a chill down Lily's spine. Sarah's breath hitched, her fingers freezing on the keys as she stared at the screens. "What's happening?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Thompson's eyes widened, his gaze fixed on the screens. "It's a failsafe," he said, his voice filled with a sense of dread. "If the shutdown sequence is initiated, the system will activate a self-preservation protocol." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Thompson's gaze met hers, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "It means we have to hurry," he said, his voice steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. "We need to complete the shutdown sequence before the system can activate the failsafe." Sarah's fingers flew over the keys, her eyes scanning the screens as she tried to bypass the failsafe. The machines around them hummed louder, their lights flickering as the failsafe protocol activated. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the screens. The data scrolled by, the machines humming louder as the failsafe protocol activated. And then, just as they were about to complete the sequence, the lights flickered again, the machines around them emitting a high-pitched whine that sent a chill down Lily's spine. Sarah's breath hitched, her fingers freezing on the keys as she stared at the screens. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't bypass it." Dr. Thompson's eyes widened, his gaze fixed on the screens. "We need to find another way," he said, his voice filled with a sense of dread. "We need to find a way to override the failsafe." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a solution. The failsafe, the shutdown sequence, the machines around them, it was a tangled web of technology and ethics, a maze with no clear path. And then, like a flash of lightning in the darkness, an idea came to her. "The woman," she said, her voice steady. "The one in the chamber. She's the key, isn't she?" Dr. Thompson's eyes widened, his gaze meeting hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to articulate her thoughts. "If she's the result of the enhancements, then maybe she can help us," she said, her voice steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. "Maybe she can override the failsafe, help us complete the shutdown sequence." Sarah's eyes met hers, her expression a mixture of hope and fear. "It's worth a try," she said, her voice steady. Dr. Thompson nodded, his gaze never leaving the screens. "All right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go." They moved through the lab, their footsteps echoing softly in the silence. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around them as they made their way back to the chamber. Inside, the woman still lay suspended, her body connected to a complex web of tubes and wires that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Her eyes were closed, her face serene and peaceful in repose. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she approached the chamber. She could feel it, the anticipation, the fear, the determination. This was it, the moment of truth, the revelation that could change everything. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the glass of the chamber. "Can you hear me?" she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes fluttered open, her gaze meeting Lily's. And for a moment, just a moment, Lily. Chapter 9. The woman's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Her gaze was unlike any Lily had ever seen, a brilliant blue that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality. They were the eyes of someone who had seen beyond the veil, who had glimpsed the infinite possibilities that lay hidden just beyond the edge of human understanding. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she stared into those eyes. She could feel it, a sense of awe and fear that was almost overwhelming. This was more than just a woman, more than just a subject of an experiment. This was something else, something that transcended the boundaries of human experience. "Can you hear me?" Lily asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes focused on her, a spark of recognition flickering deep within their depths. She seemed to be studying Lily, as if trying to understand who she was and what she wanted. Lily's mind raced, her thoughts tumbling over one another as she tried to find the right words. "We need your help," she said, her voice steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. "We're trying to stop the project, to reverse what's been done. But we can't do it alone." The woman's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding passing across her face. She seemed to be considering Lily's words, as if weighing the implications of what she was being asked. Sarah moved to Lily's side, her gaze never leaving the woman in the chamber. "We know you're not responsible for this," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "But you're the only one who can help us. You're the only one who can override the failsafe." The woman's eyes flicked to Sarah, a hint of curiosity in their depths. She seemed to be studying her, as if trying to gauge her sincerity and her intentions. Dr. Thompson stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the woman. "We can help you," he said, his voice steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. "We can give you a life outside of this chamber, a chance to experience the world." The woman's eyes widened, a spark of interest flickering deep within their depths. She seemed to be considering his words, as if trying to imagine what it would be like to be free. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the woman. She could feel it, the anticipation, the fear, the determination. This was it, the moment of truth, the revelation that could change everything. The woman's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. She seemed to be making a decision, as if weighing the risks and the rewards of what she was being asked. And then slowly she nodded. Lily's heart leaped, a surge of hope and relief flooding through her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes softened, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She seemed to be expressing her gratitude, as if acknowledging the significance of what she was about to do. Sarah moved to the console, her fingers flying over the keys as she initiated the sequence that would release the woman from the chamber. The machines around them hummed louder, their lights flickering as the sequence began to take effect. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the chamber. The woman's eyes were closed, her face serene and peaceful in repose as the tubes and wires began to detach from her body. Dr. Thompson moved to the chamber, his fingers working to open the door. It swung open with a soft hiss, the cool air within spilling out into the room. The woman's eyes fluttered open, her gaze meeting Lily's. She seemed to be assessing her, as if trying to understand who she was and what she wanted. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she stepped forward. "We need your help," she said, her voice steady, but filled with a sense of urgency. "We need you to override the failsafe, to help us complete the shutdown sequence." The woman's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding passing across her face. She seemed to be considering Lily's words, as if weighing the implications of what she was being asked. And then slowly she nodded. Lily's heart leaped, a surge of hope and relief flooding through her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes softened, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She seemed to be expressing her gratitude, as if acknowledging the significance of what she was about to do. Sarah moved to the console, her fingers flying over the keys as the woman placed her hand on the panel. The machines around them hummed louder, their lights flickering as the failsafe began to override. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the screens. The data scrolled by, the machines humming louder as the failsafe was overridden. And then, just as they were about to complete the sequence, the lights flickered again, the machines around them emitting a high-pitched whine that sent a chill down Lily's spine. Sarah's breath hitched, her fingers freezing on the keys as she stared at the screens. "It's working," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Thompson's eyes widened, his gaze fixed on the screens. "The failsafe is overridden," he said, his voice filled with a sense of awe and relief. "We did it." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the screens. The data scrolled by, the machines humming louder as the shutdown sequence initiated. The woman's eyes met hers, a silent understanding passing between them. She had done it. She had overridden the failsafe and helped them complete the shutdown sequence. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to process what had just happened. They had done it. They had stopped the project and reversed what had been done. But as she stood there, she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next, what the future held for them all. Chapter 10. The world outside the laboratory was a stark contrast to the controlled environment within. The city was alive with the sounds of sirens and chaos, the night sky illuminated by the flickering lights of emergency vehicles. Lily, Sarah, and the woman, who had yet to be named, moved through the shadows, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The woman moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, her eyes wide as she took in the sights and sounds of the world around her. She had been confined to the chamber for so long that even the simplest things, the cool night air on her skin, the scent of rain on the breeze, were a source of wonder and fascination. Lily's heart ached at the sight of her, a mixture of sympathy and determination filling her chest. She had been a prisoner, a victim of the very technology that was meant to help her. But now, she was free, and Lily was determined to help her make the most of this second chance at life. Sarah moved with a sense of urgency, her eyes scanning the streets for any sign of pursuit. "We need to move fast," she said, her voice low but filled with a sense of urgency. "They'll be looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us." The woman's eyes met Lily's, a silent question passing between them. She seemed to be asking what she should do, where she should go. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a solution. "We need to get her somewhere safe," Lily said, her voice firm. "Somewhere they won't think to look." Sarah nodded, her gaze never leaving the streets around them. "I know a place," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not far, but we'll need to move quickly." They moved through the city, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The streets were empty, the residents having fled at the first sign of trouble. The only sounds were the distant sirens and the soft hum of the city itself. As they moved, the woman seemed to grow more and more curious about her surroundings. She reached out to touch the rough bark of a tree, her fingers tracing the lines and ridges with a sense of wonder. She paused to watch a stray cat slink through an alleyway, her eyes following its movements with a mixture of fascination and fear. Lily's heart ached at the sight of her, a mixture of sympathy and determination filling her chest. She had been denied so much, had been robbed of the simple joys of life. But now, she was free, and Lily was determined to help her make the most of this second chance. They reached the safe house, a small, unassuming building nestled in a quiet residential neighborhood. The lights were off, the windows dark, but as they approached, the front door swung open, revealing a small, elderly woman with a kind face and a warm smile. Come in," she said, her voice filled with a sense of urgency. "You must be tired and hungry." The woman, the former subject of the neurotech experiment, looked at Lily, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She seemed to be asking what she should do, where she should go. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a solution. "We need to keep her safe," Lily said, her voice firm. "We need to protect her, no matter what." The elderly woman nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "You can trust me," she said, her voice steady. "I won't let anything happen to her." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched the woman, the former subject of the neurotech experiment, step through the door. She was safe, for now, but Lily knew that their fight was far from over. As the door closed behind them, Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settling over her. They had managed to evade neurotech for now, but she knew that they were far from safe. The company would stop at nothing to find them, to capture the woman and reverse the shutdown sequence. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough. Chapter 11. The city was a labyrinth of shadows and light, the streets a maze of forgotten corners and hidden dangers. Lily, Sarah, and the woman they had come to call Eve moved through the night, their footsteps soft on the cracked pavement. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the sky a canvas of swirling clouds that mirrored the turmoil within Lily's heart. Eve moved with a sense of wonder, her eyes wide as she took in the sights and sounds of the world around her. She had been confined to the chamber for so long that even the simplest things, the cool night air on her skin, the scent of rain on the breeze, were a source of awe and fascination. But beneath her curiosity, Lily could sense a growing unease, a fear that was almost palpable. Lily's heart ached at the sight of her, a mixture of sympathy and determination filling her chest. She had been a prisoner, a victim of the very technology that was meant to help her. But now, she was free, and Lily was determined to help her make the most of this second chance at life. Sarah moved with a sense of urgency, her eyes scanning the streets for any sign of pursuit. "We need to move fast," she said, her voice low but filled with a sense of urgency. "They'll be looking for us, and they won't stop until they find us." Eve's eyes met Lily's, a silent question passing between them. She seemed to be asking what she should do, where she should go. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a solution. "We need to get her somewhere safe," Lily said, her voice firm. "Somewhere they won't think to look." Sarah nodded, her gaze never leaving the streets around them. "I know a place," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not far, but we'll need to move quickly." They moved through the city, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. The streets were empty, the residents having fled at the first sign of trouble. The only sounds were the distant sirens and the soft hum of the city itself. As they moved, Eve seemed to grow more and more curious about her surroundings. She reached out to touch the rough bark of a tree, her fingers tracing the lines and ridges with a sense of wonder. She paused to watch a stray cat slink through an alleyway, her eyes following its movements with a mixture of fascination and fear. Lily's heart ached at the sight of her, a mixture of sympathy and determination filling her chest. She had been denied so much, had been robbed of the simple joys of life. But now, she was free, and Lily was determined to help her make the most of this second chance. They reached the safe house, a small, unassuming building nestled in a quiet residential neighborhood. The lights were off, the windows dark, but as they approached, the front door swung open, revealing a small, elderly woman with a kind face and a warm smile. Come in," she said, her voice filled with a sense of urgency. "You must be tired and hungry." Eve looked at Lily, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She seemed to be asking what she should do, where she should go. Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing as she tried to think of a solution. "We need to keep her safe," Lily said, her voice firm. "We need to protect her, no matter what." The elderly woman nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "You can trust me," she said, her voice steady. "I won't let anything happen to her." Lily's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching in her throat as she watched Eve step through the door. She was safe, for now, but Lily knew that their fight was far from over. As the door closed behind them, Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settling over her. They had managed to evade neurotech for now, but she knew that they were far from safe. The company would stop at nothing to find them, to capture Eve and reverse the shutdown sequence. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough.